Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you are having a fantastic day. If you're new to the channel, my name is Parker Nierenstein, and this is Vehicle Virgins. I compared the new M2 competition to the M2. But in this video, I wanted to highlight 5 things I hate about the M2 competition. Starting with, let me show you around back. The first thing I hate about the M2 competition has to do with the rear end. Now, the redesigned front end looks stunning, but the rear, well, it looks good, but they have one enormous flaw, and that has to do with that right there. Look how big and look how far the muffler hangs down. It's just hanging there, just chilling in the air, looking really, it's just inappropriate, to be honest, to be sticking out like that. But honestly, I hate the way that thing looks. It almost looks like a massive, oversized, accidental aftermarket muffler that was just tacked on. And that leads me to my next point, the sound. I first have to say that the M2 is one of my favorite cars BMW has ever made. It falls in line with cars like the E46 M3. Raw, unadulterated, fun, nimble sports cars that just put a smile on your face every time you're driving them. So don't worry, I don't hate this car. I just wanted to point out some negatives that I felt that BMW, I understand why they did it, but in a sense, I'm a little bit disappointed. That brings me to point number 2, and that is the sound. Now, why does this car sound so much worse than the previous generation M2? That is because it has a different motor. This is the S55 engine from the M3 and the M4, whereas the previous generation M2 had an N55. Both 3-liter inline 6s, however, the N55 was twin-scroll single turbo, and the S55 that's in this is twin turbo. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it sounds raspy, and it sounds like a bunch of farts, and I really don't like, in any way, shape, or form, the way that it sounds. It's got noise to it, but when you let off the gas, it just sounds like rasping farts. I can't think of a better term. It's like if a Dyson vacuum were to break, then you stick it in a Ninja blender, and then you farted right next to it and put that sound compilation together, and that's the way it would sound. It actually sounds a bit like a ricer, and that's an unbelievable thing to say about a new generation BMW, but it just doesn't nail it. Whereas the previous generation with the N55 actually had its own characteristics that sounded great. The burbles were nice and appealing. When you left off the gas, the overrun sounded good. It actually sounded like a good car, and it was a true reason to buy the M2 over the M3 or the M4 was the sound of it alone. And now we've got this, which is just simply underwhelming. Can you fix it? Not really. I've heard almost every single variation of M3 and M4 exhaust, and short of the M4 GTS, which was the best attempt I've ever heard at fixing the sound of the S55 engine, they just never really were able to do that. So unfortunately, aftermarket options also are limited with this, whereas the aftermarket options on the N55 sounded really, really good. All right, let's get on to the next one. The next thing that I hate about the M2 competition is its weight. In general, competition cars should be lighter, they should be faster, they should be more nimble, they should be more expensive, but they shouldn't be heavier. This car weighs 3,600 pounds, which is 150 pounds more than the outgoing M2. I'm not sure how they could possibly take an M2, call it a competition, and make it weigh more. Now, this all goes back to the decision of putting that M3 and M4 engine in the car. The car is now heavier and it sounds worse, but it's heavier to the point where it's starting to get a little bit ridiculous. For instance, a car like the AMG GTR with a massive V8 in it weighs the same as this. That has crazy aerodynamics, it has rear wheel steering and a lot of components that are heavy, yet somehow it weighs the same. And when you look at the shape of that car and how much bigger it feels when you're driving it, the fact that they weigh the same is almost dumbfounding to me. Now, this car weighed 3,250 pounds and weighed similar to maybe some 911 or Cayman or Boxster competitors. If it weighed 3,250 pounds, this car would be better in every single way. Even if it just weighed the same, 3,450 pounds, it would be better. But it just weighs far too much, and that takes a lot of the fun out of the car. Now, not saying it isn't a fantastic, fun to drive car. It is, but that means that in turn-in, that means mid-corner, that means while braking, that means while accelerating, you've got extra mass that you just can't get around. That's part of the reason why McLaren focuses, and Porsche, so heavily on weight savings, is every single pound that you drop makes the car better and better and better in every category. Even fuel efficiency, if BMW cares about fuel efficiency, which they do on the M2, it would be better as well if it was lighter. It still is fast though, that's for dang sure. And it feels nice to drive. And that transmission response, woo, that is ballistic. The only thing is, it doesn't feel like its own car anymore. Brings me to my next point. With the same engine as an M3 and M4, you've now made an M2 a crappier version of an M4. What do I mean by that? Well, previously they had different engines. They had different sounds because of the different engines. They felt like two entirely different cars, and there was a weight difference as well. But now that the M2 competition has the same engine as the M4, it weighs more than before, and it sounds every bit as bad as an M4. What they've done is created the poor man's, cheaper, less impressive M4. We've now got the same engine, but it's detuned. We know what the car is capable of with the M4 GTS, the competition package, and we know that they aren't giving it its all. Sure, 405 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque is a welcome improvement over the previous generation M2, but it's still very shy of the M4, and we know that the only reason it is shy is to not create competition amongst the M2 and the M4. And I think what happened was the M2 was so good, there was no reason to buy an M4 anymore. And instead of making the M4 better, they've just decided to make the M2 worse. And now you have the M2 competition package, which is essentially a restrained version of the BMW M4. And that saddens me, because before, I would have bought the M2 over any BMW available. It was that fun, spunky car that they didn't make anything else like. And now they've just made a lesser version of the M4. And I hope that in the next generation of the M2 competition and the M4, they make it different enough to where it makes sense to buy the M2, not just because it's cheaper than the M4, but because it's a different car. And that brings me to my last point, and that is the price. Not only is it heavier, not only does it have a little more horsepower, actually a lot more horsepower, but it is significantly more expensive than the previous generation M2 as well, which started at $53,000, and this one starts at $58,900. As spec'd, this car was $67,000, which is getting to be ridiculous territory. Honestly, that feels extremely overpriced to me, and it's more than 10 grand more expensive than a very well-spec'd previous generation M2 for a car that sounds worse and is heavier, namely. So with that, there are 5 things I hate about the M2 competition package. I love the car. It is really fun to drive. BMW did do a very good job with the M2, but I think with the competition package, they might, other than the power, have taken a step backwards instead of a step forwards. I loved that pure, raw emotion of the M2, and they've taken some of that out, especially with the sound in the new car. So I'm gonna leave you with, well, a point of view clip so you can feel what it's like to drive this thing, because honestly, that is its strong suit, and maybe that'll help eradicate the fears that BMW is going in the wrong direction. Hopefully not. I am very excited to see the future of the BMW M line as the new M3 comes out. The new M5 is absolutely killing it. The M5 competition package has just come out. We're gonna have to do a review on that. And we've got the M8 coming out as well. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. Here's a point of view video for the rest of it. Hit it.